everybody. Welcome to another edition of Double Cross Radio. This is your host, Chuck Horton. I'm printing off something as I talk here. I'm bringing you some up-to-the-minute news. Actually, this is from a couple days ago. I'm just printing out some stories that I thought you might be able to share with you folks tonight. I have to kind of apologize. I didn't have any time at all to put together a show tonight, but I was doing some long-term research for the future shows today. Some of it it was very uplifting and really gave me a kind of a shot and a kick in the rear end, get me going on some really positive, uplifting things. Most of it's coming from the book I'm reading by Jeffrey Tucker, A Beautiful Anarchy. Excuse me. But I thought I would cover some of this news because it's really relevant to a lot of the things that I was going over today. They seem to all tie together. Everything seems to be connected these days. Maybe I'm just too conspiratorial. Who knows? Okay, first of all, had a headline. This is actually from last week. This was by Ben Bullard. It was on Liberty, Personal Liberty. And Ben writes, a new paper from Cato Institute won't do anything to kill off all those stereotypes about government and the good life. Federal employees on average earn 78% more in pay and benefits than their counterparts in the private sector. Cato's report, quote, reducing the cost of federal worker pay and benefits, unquote, reveals that government benefits and wages haven't kept pace with private sector growth over the past 20 years. They've raced past it. Since the 1990s, federal workers have been doing faster compensation growth than private sector workers. In 2014, federal workers earned 78% more on average than private sector workers. Federal workers earn 43% more on average than state and local government workers. The federal government has become an elite island of secure, high-paid unemployment, separated from an ocean of average Americans competing in the economy. And while this story kind of makes me sick to my stomach, it's horrible. What makes it even worse is those federal employees are receiving those wages from our taxes, and those taxes and wages are being used to pay them to construct the most hideous prison in the history of mankind, and that being they're using our own productivity to enslave us and imprison us. Now, that's kind of just sick. Then I had this is from InfoWars, Kit Daniels reporting. The DOJ announced it will appoint a domestic terrorism council to focus on who the Obama administration and controversial Southern Poverty Law Center considered extremists. So just why does the Southern Poverty Law Center have any say at all into what goes on? This is an extreme, I don't know what you call it, they're fascistic organization bent on destroying America. And I don't know why they are getting to have a voice in how policies are made. Looking back over the past few years, it is clear that domestic terrorists and homegrown violent extremists remain a real and present danger to the United States. Clear to who? Or was that whom? I don't think homegrown extremists, violent extremists, are a problem at all. I think maybe people strung out on drugs or people who are under the care of psychiatrists and taking, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRI, whatever they are. Those are the people that are problems. Militia members, most commonly associated with third-party political groups. There hasn't been a militia member associated with a third-party political group ever. They tried to kind of tie Timothy McVeigh to a Minnesota or Michigan militia group, but that was the guy that was in that militia group was one of his friends, but he wasn't really part of that. And I think he was a patsy. It was set up. I think he was working on behalf of the Southern Poverty Law Center and decided he didn't want to have any part of greasing a bunch of kids in a daycare center, and so they set him up to take the fall because it looked like he was somebody that might turn state's evidence on the people who actually did the Oklahoma City bombing. There's a really excellent documentary on that, by the way. If you ever get a chance to watch it, you can. It's distributed by InfoWars, and it's just fabulous. I won't go into that anymore. There were some presidential debates this week. Wow, if you can call it a debate. I tell you, the Democrat Party has huge problems, and that Hillary Clinton is the best candidate they can get to run. And America has a bigger problem in that if she gets nominated, she'll probably win. And some of you people want to know why I'm interested in living in Mexico or Panama or Guatemala or Chile, Colombia. Because I want to live in a country where government workers don't earn 78% more than I do, because I'm a lot more productive than they are. I actually produce goods and services that people want. Who in their right mind would ever pay for anything the government produces? It's going to be way overpriced. And paying all those benefits and extra wages, they would never ever operate at a profit if they weren't funded by stealing our hard-earned money through the quote-unquote legal process of taxation, which is still immoral, and slavery, still wrong. If the government actually had to compete with private sector for its bread, they would go broke. If the government had to produce something that people wanted in order to earn money to sustain itself, no one would ever sign up for any government program. They have just a huge negative record of incompetence, paying too much for stuff. I mean, we've heard about the $150 hammers, and that was back when $150 was real money. We've heard about the $200 toilet seats. We've heard about there's just so much waste. It's incredible. I have a friend he's in the granite countertop business, and they were building a new post office in Grants Pass, which is a city near Medford, where I live. Now, apparently the government had not heard that there's this new thing called email, which is going to make the postal service almost obsolete. But they're going to build a new post office there anyway. And he said he wasn't sure how to bid this because he wanted to make sure that he made some money on it, but he kind of wanted to make sure he got the job. And he finally decided, oh, heck with it, I'm going to bid it to make a ton of money. If I get it, great. If I don't, I'll go off and I'll keep working on what I'm working on now. And, whatever. It ends up he got the job. And he bid it for about 4 times what he normally would have bid a private sector job, because he knew the other people who were bidding against, they were also feather bedding their bids as well. And he just didn't feather bed his quite as much. And so he got this job to supply the granite for this post office that is already, before they even broke ground, it was an obsolete building. I mean, it's that's why the post office is losing tens of billions of dollars a year. And but they do have a nice post office in Grants Pass. The post office they built in Medford a few years ago that was supposed to last 100 years had to be turned. Actually, it wasn't a few years ago. It was about 40 years ago. It had to be torn down because of asbestos. Yeah, that was really something. So that 100-year building that building to last 100 years didn't quite work out the way they said it would. It's typical of a government program. And I tell you, all you people that think, well, gosh, this is still the best place on earth. It's not even the top 40 anymore. Let's stop kidding ourselves. And don't turn around and point fingers at me and say leaving is the worst thing I can do. I should stay and fight it out. I've been trying to rally support for my point of view, my vision for peaceful, voluntarist, free market activities, and I get no support. So I said, well, let's go where I'm not as small a minority as I am in a country of 350 million. Let's go someplace where I may be in a country of maybe 10 million. That's a much louder voice than I have in a country of 300. Of course, I may have to learn how to speak Spanish, but I'm working on that. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? See, I'm just a natural, I think. Anyway, the uplifting part of what I was talking about, and I really hope I'm not quite far enough through with this book to send a second request to Jeffrey, actually a third request to Jeffrey Tucker. The first two times he was going to be on, and the first time the first Republican debate came up, and the second time he had a dinner party planned that night. And I believe him. I don't think he would lie. I think he'd tell me he just doesn't have time if he didn't have time. And I'm finding that as negative as I get sometimes, and I get bogged down in all this negative news, that here's a man that's just full of optimism and hope for the human condition. And he sees all these negative things as being negative, but he sees the human condition as being really a wonderful thing, because despite all this, people continue to strive, to innovate, to find workarounds, to find ways to make their the attempted imprisonment of their mind and their actions futile, with their own ingenuity and their just hard work and determination to be free. And I find that if I just look around my own life, I can see these things in my own life. They're out there for all of us to see, really. Today, while I was out walking the dogs before the show, I see in the sky a man flying in one of those lightweight aircrafts. Basically, it's a hang glider with a airplane engine, or a little rotor engine that drives a propeller behind it that pushes it through the air. And this guy was just really making some good time, tooling around the valley, looking at, making some turns and flying over scenery, and I'm thinking, that really looks like that is something. It wasn't any enormous jump forward in technology to build one of these. This is something that could have been done 50 years ago. Why didn't anyone come up with that idea 50 years ago? It could have been done even longer than that ago. It could have been done prior to World War II. Why weren't people doing stuff like that? Could it be that maybe government was slowing down and limiting people's access to or their ability to innovate and create such things as an ultralight flying machine? And it also could have been that the flying regulations were such, that intellectual property laws were such, that it was just kind of something that you didn't want to do because you're probably going to get caught doing something you shouldn't be doing. You have to pay all your investment money over to somebody else. They're going to get your invention because you use their intellectual property. And so that progress that should have, this wasn't complicated stuff. It's basically a two-stroke motor with a propeller on it and a little steel frame with a hang glider. It's not hard at all to envision how that could have been built a long, long time ago. In fact, if you look back through the drawings of Leonardo da Vinci, he probably had a similar drawing for manned flight. It may have been with a bicycle pedal turning the propeller, but it's not hard to imagine that we could go out and have flight like this. Excuse me. I hope I don't fall asleep in the middle of a sentence this night. But it's fascinating that all the different kinds of workarounds and ways that people find to just ignore the laws and regulations and rules that get imposed upon us by by the people that are there saying that they're our benefactors. And they really aren't. They don't ever produce anything. They just anoint themselves, the leaders, the rulers, those who are due our taxation, those who earn 78% more than we who actually produce things do, for doing nothing but slowing everybody down, slowing down the progress of mankind. Can you imagine if, we have spent, I don't know how many trillions of dollars in gasoline taxes to maintain an infrastructure that's falling apart. So obviously there's a lot of money being wasted there. What if those trillions of dollars have been put into research into flying cars? What if those trillions of dollars have been invested in any other direction than in building and maintaining an infrastructure, a road system that's falling apart? The bridges are way past the point where they should have been replaced. The replacement rate of these bridges is really slow. In some areas of the country where they are prone to earthquakes, Southern California, we can see that there's just a disaster waiting to happen down there. Because they have not, concrete, it takes it about 30 to 50 years to get hard. And some of you are looking at me and go, Chuck, I don't know how to tell you this, but concrete gets hard in a couple hours. Well, no, it really keeps getting harder and harder and harder up until about, it depends on the mix that they use, but 50 years is pretty much the optimum. And after that time, it starts to fall apart. So concrete buildings, it's pretty hard to imagine they would last more than 100 years. That would be a legitimate lifespan for a concrete building. It's a legitimate lifespan for that type of a use. But a road that has a constant vibration and thundering over the cars, whatever, pieces of the top being chipped away, and maybe water getting in there from the rainstorms and oxidizing the rebar that reinforces, those are probably much less than 100 years. Probably 50 years is really stretching it. Maybe 30 years is an optimum for a bridge. Maybe 50 would be an outside top. Well, there's a lot of bridges and structures that are over 50 years old in the United States. And no one seems to be too concerned about it. Every once in a while you hear about a bridge collapsing and people driving their cars off into a river, or happened up in Minnesota. That was quite they said that was a contractor using substandard materials. Oh, bullshit. It was a portion of the road that was due to be replaced, repaired, and they used the money for something else because they thought this can last another year. The politicians screwed it up. The government screwed it up. They don't use that money for what it's intended to be used for. Oh, I have a low ink reminder on my printer. The black 252 is low. It's almost out. So I'm going to have to replace my black ink before I print anything else out. So that's good to know. Anyway, back to the subject here, and I listened today to, and I posted a link to this on our Facebook page. So if those of you want to hear this podcast by Simon Black, I really, really, really suggest you do this. And those of you who think that everything's going to be okay, you are smoking something I would like to get a hold of, because whatever it is that Kickapoo Joy Juice that you're smoking is not doing you any favors. Because we are in worse financial shape than a lot of countries that have already collapsed, or they're in a slow motion collapse. And the only thing that's keeping us afloat is the rest of the world believes that the United States is still a bastion of liberty and freedom, and that we have untold wealth, and probably that view is reinforced by our military that just seems to always have the most neatest tools, and it almost seems like they're out of a movie. They're so unbelievably good. Well, I got news for you. There ain't going to be any soldiers around to use those weapons when their checks start bouncing. The United States is broke. We are bankrupt, and there isn't enough money in the world to pay off the debt that we owe. So what does that mean? Well, I suggest that you take a listen to his podcast. Simon Black is really a tremendously intellectual speaker. He's young, not really like a teenager young. He's like in his 30s, I believe. And he may be in his 40s. He looks younger than that, though. He's very intelligent. He's focused on really finding the truth about everything. He's very smart. He's a graduate of West Point, and they don't allow dummies in there. He has a tremendous knowledge of history. He understands how to read. He probably is a very fast reader. They teach him how to speed read there for content, so he's able to just go through material really quickly. I wish I could do that. But he gets he's a fabulous researcher, I guess what I'm trying to say. And that podcast is so full of useful information. And he comes to this one conclusion. If you know you're living in a country that is probably going to collapse sometime in the near future, within your lifetime, it could be tomorrow, it could be 10 years from now, but it seems like there's almost no escape at this point. And I believe that there is no escape. No seeming about it. There just is no escape. Now, excuse me, I have to take another drink. I'm really trying to keep my voice from collapsing tonight. Okay, so we have huge debt. We have, he pointed to all the objections to the debt problem, that we have the ability to tax ourselves. Well, that's not a great deal. You know, that just means that they can take everything that you earn. So they can borrow against the ability to make us into tax slaves. Well, they already have done that. Why do you think it is so hard to leave this country now? When you leave the country and you work out of country, you work in another country, if you make any kind of sizable income at all there, the United States still wants to tax us. One of the few countries in the world that does this. This is so hideous that many people have renounced their citizenship because they don't want to be a debt slave to this country anymore. I think it's over 12,000 have done this since 2001, and every quarter the number grows. More and more people every quarter. And you say, well, I've looked into it, and you can make $100,000 out of country. You don't have to pay any taxes. Plus, you can deduct your expenses for living out of country and your income, and so it's basically there's no big deal about it. Well, you still have to spend your time and effort filling out countless forms to explain all these things, and if you forget, and they come out with new forms for you to do every year, and you better have an accountant that's right up to date on all the stuff that you have to file for, because there are several cases on record now of people who tried to pay what they felt were the taxes they owed, and maybe overpaid, maybe underpaid, didn't ever get to that point. They forgot to file a new form that had to be filed, and the the fines and penalties for not filing that form just about wiped them out financially. And it seems to me like they're trying to strip everybody that leaves this country of any wealth that they may have had. They feel like, well, don't let the door hit you in the behind as you're going out. It's kind of the attitude. You don't want to play on our team? Fine. We want to take all your money and kick you out. That sounds like a real fair place. It's like you earned your money because of them, not because of your hard work or your innovation or your willingness to work 80 hours a week to get ahead, to hold double jobs or to have your own business and just work countless hours just to make sure that you're better than everybody else that you're competing with. I mean, these government workers, they don't even work. The highest usage of pornography, these free porn sites, are visited most often by computers with IP sites that are owned by governments. The government workers. That's the highest. That's the I guess it's the most frequent customer for these sites. Gambling sites, pornography sites. They're not working. They're just sitting at a desk playing Words with Friends, we hope. If that'd be the best case scenario. And then whatever else they're going to do. The government workers, there's a new thing going around. A lot of the government workers are they're leaving their desk and they're going out, and on the way to the bathroom they decide they just can't wait any longer, and they pull in their pants and they poop in the hallway. And that's happened. That's been recorded many times. I mean, these people are getting paid 78% more than people in the private sector, and they can't even function properly to go to the bathroom. And some people are saying they're doing that as a protest. A protest against what? Earning 78% more than the private sector workforce? I mean, what are they protesting? That their cousin Bernie couldn't get a job on sitting in his computer doing, watching porn like they do? I mean, I don't understand this at all. And I have no respect for bureaucrats, people who work in these government offices. So I'm sure some of them are decent people. I don't want to paint everybody with the same broad brush, but I also know that these people that are decent people are also cowards. They're afraid to call people out for their poor behavior. They don't want to lose their cushy job where they make 78% more than the average worker. So anyway, we had these debates this week, and I have to say I'm going to say this. It's kind of before I get into this, that there are several things about Bernie Sanders that I like. None of them deal with his economic policies, which I think are. I think to believe in Bernie Sanders' economic policies, you have to be, one, either hideously evil, or two, incredibly stupid. The things he's proposing have never, ever, ever worked in the history of mankind. So, they've been tried many times. But I do like one thing that he stands for, and that is he's against the wars in the Middle East. But I have to say this, he has been kind of backpedaling on that a little bit, because he thinks he may have a chance to win, and he's going to have to go after that My Country, Right or Wrong vote eventually if he's going to win. So, who knows? I mean, Obama said he was going to end the wars. He never did. That was my one hope, that there would be that one silver lining in the dark cloud. No pun intended. But there wasn't even that. The wars have gotten worse and more frequent and more onerous. And now the enemies that we fight are even more confusing, because they don't seem to have anything to do with who our enemies were last year or the year before, and they seem to be all of them are using the weapons that they somehow are able to salvage from abandoned U.S. training bases. And I'm just wondering how stupid we have to be to keep believing that the U.S. government is so inept that it would continually do this over and over and over again. And I think that a lot of people know the truth, but they're afraid to speak out, because they know what happened to Ambassador Stevens, and he said he was going to blow the whistle on him. They took care of him rather nicely. And I think a lot of the Republicans are afraid to press Hillary Clinton on the email issue, because they know what happened to Ambassador Stevens. And they know about the Clinton body count list. And they know that she plays to win, and she doesn't take any prisoners. And if you cross her, you're probably dead meat. And I mean that literally. That's another reason I think that she's probably going to win the nomination. I don't think there's anything stopping her. She's got literally billions of dollars behind her, and I think she'll probably be the next president. And I hope that before that day happens, that I'm somewhere out of country, safe and sound, somewhere that isn't a nuclear target, somewhere where we don't have all these incessant chemtrails, somewhere where we don't have a government telling me that I can't own my own property. I have to pay them a tax, that they own all the land. They have rights to take my property if I don't pay them some kind of property tax. that I don't have the right to what I produce with my own labor, and that if I invent something that somebody halfway across the world has also invented, then I have no right to the profits from that because maybe he invented it 6 months before I did and filed intellectual property papers on it, and that patent system keeps me from using that invention for my own purposes when it's the same. And I had no idea that he had even done that. He hadn't produced any products. He just entered the patent and was just sitting on it. All these types of things that happen are just things that really bother me about my country. I used to be an ardent patriot, and I almost had that my country right or wrong attitude. And I believed the stuff about this being America having exceptionalism. I don't believe that anymore at all. I think we're exceptionally naive. We're exceptionally undereducated. We're exceptionally addicted to drugs. We're exceptionally easily propagandized. In terms of being a world leader, productive, somebody that everybody else would want to emulate, there's no exceptionalism here anymore. Exceptionalism is lost. Those 12,000 people that left this country to make their fortunes other places in the world, those people were exceptional. Those people had grit, and they're not afraid of things. They don't cower in fear. They just go out there and they take the world by the horns, and they see opportunity and they seize it. And they do things to make the world a better place. And people reward them with money because they build structures and inventions and grow products, produce that they want. And they produce the qualities they want, the quantities they want, at prices that they want. And so they succeed. They succeed by serving their fellow man voluntarily. That's not how it is in this country anymore. And yet there's still people here that are innovative. They find workarounds. They find ways to make the government look stupid. It reminds me of the story of the nail company, the company in the old Soviet Union that made nails. And this company, they got paid, at first they got paid by the nail. And it's hard to make a living doing that, this machinery that they had to make the nails, stamp them out, kind of forge them. But they discovered that they could run their machinery much faster if they were making smaller nails. So they made little tiny brads, like nails that are pretty much worthless for anything other than maybe tacking a piece of cardboard to the back of a picture frame or something. A worthless project, but they got paid by how many they made, and they made millions of them. And they didn't use up very many resources either. Well, the government couldn't have this, so they came out with a new edict that they would now be paid only for producing nails that weighed over a certain amount. They got paid by the tonnage that they were able to produce, actually. So they got paid by weight. So all those millions of nails, they didn't weigh enough to even get much of a paycheck for those anymore. So they just retooled their operation, and they started making these huge railroad spikes. Unfortunately, there was no demand for those railroad spikes, but the tonnage was immense. Well, all the time there were people waiting in line to get what we would call like a 16-penny nail, which is a common framing nail here for carpentry work. 8-penny nails, which also they used to nail sheeting onto framing. 4-penny nails, which is more or less something you might use in furniture making. And they can use 4-penny nails and brads and finish nails and so on and so forth, all sorts of different nails. But all the kinds of nails that would be useful and productive were in very short supply because the the government didn't believe in the market forces, didn't believe that demand for a product would give somebody a signal that they needed to produce more of that product in order to prosper. And how are they going to find that? How are they going to discover that demand? Well, it's transmitted through market forces. And really, every single day, literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of messages like that are transmitted through just plain old market forces, and a few people are astute enough to pick up on these and to think them through and to figure out what this demand really means and to innovate and find ways to make products to fill that demand. And they're called entrepreneurs. My friend Drew, he's an entrepreneur. I mean, this man is, I wish I had his courage. He's the kind of guy, he might be doing a show, he might be coming on and doing a show with us someday from Chile. He might be, he's not having much luck with, well, I'm not saying not having much luck. He's done very well with his initial attempts or initial forays into aquaponics. He's been able to earn an income, and the income isn't quite provided him with the ability to do everything that he wanted to do. But it showed that he could produce products that other people want, and he could produce those products in a way that no one's ever done it before, in an abandoned warehouse. And he's able to take something that's being thrown away, change its use, produce microgreens for salads and such that he could give to restaurants that are still growing. They're still in their mineral wool beds, nutrition beds, and they're still sprouting up. And then they can harvest them as they need them, and they're still, because they're still growing, they're going to be fresh when they put them on somebody's salad. It's just incredible flavors. The waste products from these plants feed the fish. The fish are harvested and also sold to restaurants. It seems like a pretty cool system. The other food for the fish is generated by black soldier flies that devour composting garbage. And when I say devour, I mean they are insatiable. They have insatiable appetites. They eat tremendous amounts. When they've mated and laid their eggs, those eggs grow into these little worms, and the worms are they're like a larvae. They are what eat all that stuff, and they grow very quickly, get to a certain stage, and then they go into a pupa, which is like what they're in until they hatch back into another black soldier fly. In that pupa state, he's able to, they're kind of they're going through a metamorphosis, but he's able to grind those up and use that to feed the fish. So he's getting rid of a garbage problem and using the flies that devour this garbage to feed the fish that he is raising for the restaurants and other uses like that. This is just the kind of thing that innovative people do. People who have I don't know the exact way to put that, but people that have a real passion about something. I've talked about passion on this show quite a bit. The Wright brothers and others, people like that. We talked about Dr. Wallach a while back. That's someone with passion. This is somebody that's been just kicked in the teeth by the system since the 1970s. This is the man who discovered a cure for cystic fibrosis. He discovered excuse me, I had to cough, but I used the cough button that time. That was a big cough. Dr. Wallach discovered that cystic fibrosis wasn't a genetic disease at all. It was caused by a mineral deficiency. It's caused by a mineral deficiency that could be taken care of with a supplement that would cost, a typical sufferer about $4 a month. Well, what did he get for discovering this thing that was killing children right and left? He got fired. He got blackballed from being a research veterinarian. He couldn't find work in that profession any longer. The National Institute of Health made sure of that. And in the meantime, 30 million children died of cystic fibrosis from then until now. All because of government. And those people that were keeping those children from having life-saving supplement added to their diet that would cure their problem. Well, I guess that they weren't entitled. They were getting denied that by people making 78% more than their families made. They're getting paid 78% more to ensure the death of 30 million children, innocent people by and large. So that's what government is capable of. That's what they're most known for, is how they foul everything up. I use foul because there might be children listening. But there's another stronger word that probably better describes it. People in government are there to protect the interests of the big businesses that have influence over those governments. And you only have to look at the Federal Drug Administration, which is full of people from the pharmaceutical industry, from Monsanto, from Syngenta, from all these genetic food companies, that they've infiltrated the FDA, and it's just made up of all these people that are there to make sure that the interests of those big corporations are served. And this was supposed to be something that was serving us, this government, of the people, by the people, for the people. It doesn't serve us at all. It takes from us, though. It takes from us, and the people that are working in this industry called government, they make 78% more than we do. Well, listen to that podcast by Simon Black. It'll explain how inevitable and how impossible the debt the United States government holds is. And we've talked about this on the show since day one. And this debt that we have, I'm actually really happy that more and more people are becoming aware of this and preparing. I don't know exactly what you do to prepare. I don't know how long this bad period is going to go through when everything crashes and contracts. I don't know if we're going to be looking at Walking Dead kind of scenarios, or if we're going to look at maybe something similar to the Great Depression, or what. Or if we're going to be looking at states breaking away from the Union and counties breaking away from states and having just small societies that are bound by self-protection pledges, defending themselves against marauding hordes. I don't know. It could be very peaceful, that people just continue to try and make as much as they can out of stuff, and maybe without all this government intervention and obfuscation. I can't say that word, so let's try a different word. Well, we'll just skip it. Without all the government interference in our lives, then maybe the people will start to be more productive, and actually we'll start to have a phoenix of freedom arising out of the ashes of this destroyed society. And I tell you, the day of that destruction can't come soon enough for me. I don't think it's going to be a fun time, but the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be. It's kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off. It pulls all the hair out as you go, and if you just yank it off, it hurts really bad for a little bit, and then it's okay. If you just try and peel it slowly off it, you're just in agony for maybe 10, 15 minutes instead of a few seconds. Well, it's kind of like that. If we try and somehow prevent this pain that's going to happen when this economy collapses, all we're doing is just prolonging the agony. We're making more and more people unable to provide for that uncertain future. by preparing themselves through accumulating assets and maybe living more simply, but stockpiling those things that are going to be necessary to survive. In the meantime, it might be a good idea, as Simon Black says, to take a portion of your investment, your what we would call your capital, your disposable investment capital. That would be, let's say you had a house and you'd paid it off. Well, maybe you could take out a mortgage on it, or even if you hadn't paid it completely off, you could take a second mortgage and still be able to be comfortable making payments. And you could take that money and use that money to invest in another part of the world where prices of that money would, buy you far more than it would here. James Guzman had the Borderless podcast. They had an excellent podcast this week where they talked with a man who's pretty much spent his life. He's a real estate financer. He worked in real estate in the United States and just about almost got wiped out by the collapse of the real estate bubble, 2008. But he had already had assets in other countries, and he went around, and his theory was you just want to go and find things that are undervalued. And you find things that are undervalued, and you purchase them, and you hold on to them until they become valued as you see that they will be. And most of the time, he's been pretty good at picking things like that. And then you either develop them or sell them. And that's how he makes his living. And he goes around the world doing that. I think Simon Black goes around the world doing that. Jeff Berwick goes around the world doing that. They aren't the only ones. I think probably every one of those 12,000 people that had renounced their citizenship, that's pretty much the vast majority of those people. That's what they do. They go around the world. They find things that, they use their experiences, their life experiences, to find places that are undervalued, and they find ways to either bring other people's awareness of those places to them. We call that advertising, or they find ways to develop them to maximize the potential profit or the potential value of that property. Now, that could come from anywhere from buying some land and making it into a working farm that produces very good food. And by the way, food, I think, is going to be very important in this coming decades. The ability to produce quality food is going to make you wealthy. Farming is going to be, through the ability to multiply the use of your labor through mechanical devices and having the proper climate conditions, the added knowledge we have about growing things. There's lots of places around the world that are just perfect for growing wine, for growing potatoes, for growing all sorts of crops. And a lot of them are in places that really are largely undiscovered. So people don't even know how much the property that they're living on is really worth, what it could be producing. And in a world where there's hungry people, being able to produce food is probably the key to becoming financially set in the coming decades. Anyway, I got a few minutes left here tonight. Like I said, I'm going to apologize because I didn't really have time to focus in on this topic tonight. I really want to urge all of you to have a chance to get a hold of this book by Jeffrey Tucker called A Beautiful Anarchy. And anarchy to a lot of people means Molotov cocktails and riots in the streets, and that's not really what it means. Anarchy doesn't mean that it's not a world without rules. It means it's a world without rulers. And he's kind of, I think Jeffrey Tucker writes in a real uplifting style. Even when he's complaining about how bad something is, he talks about how awesome the people are that having this burden to carry through their life of dealing with this government and how it intrudes on their lives and how they've found ways to go around them and to outdo them and to still be creative and productive people. One of the chapters is I haven't got to yet. It talks about the Aaron. What was Aaron Schwartz case? Aaron was probably committed suicide, although people who knew him said he was fighting lifelong depression, and as we know, the psychotropic drugs that they use on people to fight depression are quite often lead to greater depths of depression and maybe even could be responsible for taking his own life. But Aaron Schwartz was a brilliant man. He was not much more than a boy. I mean, he was someone who graduated from Ivy League school at 19, college. He was immediately in a master's program. He was working on all sorts of technical devices. Just a genius. Very creative. He single-handedly stopped SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act, because he saw it for the evil that it was. And someone who was a hero. There's a YouTube documentary on his life, and I don't know if it's still free to watch or not, but if you get a chance to watch that, you should watch that. It's very sad about his life and what happened, and really for something that wasn't, I mean, I suppose technically it might have been a crime, but the people that he committed against, they didn't see it as being a theft of their intellectual property, and they didn't want to prosecute. But the prosecutor did because he thought this would help him get promoted. Another one of those federal jobs where you make 78% more than the people who actually produce things that other people want. And he also talks about Ross Ulbricht, the man on the Silk Road who I think was framed, got sent to prison for life for arranging for a contract killing, which I don't think he did, because the Free Pirate, or the Pirate Roberts did that, and there were about 7 or 8 people that at different times were the Pirate Roberts. And there were a couple of federal agents that had hacked into the site, and it even could have been them acting on this, and they have both been since arrested for stealing the Bitcoin that Ross Ulbricht had amassed and trying to sell it. So you don't know. Anyway, those also were government people who make 78% more than the people in the private sector who actually produce things that people want. And in this book, he also talks about how, despite all this intimidation and so forth, that there are people who are going dark. They are literally finding ways to accomplish what they accomplish without using superior technology that's actually free. And they use this superior technology to get encrypted. They're in computers to basically put a curtain around everything they do so that the government can't spy on them, and they go on doing their lives and sharing information with people freely and cooperating and just acting in voluntary manners, and they're peacefully going about their business, harming no one. And then remember the story last week we told of the Ottoman Empire and how when they decided to restrict the printing press, to keep the printing press out of Turkey, it allowed the rest of the world to just shoot past them like a rocket ship going to Mars. And in less than one generation, they'd gone from being way ahead of everybody, technologically speaking, to being way behind. And that's what's happening right now. It's another reason maybe to find another place to live, because this is not going to be the best place in the world in the future. I don't think for a long, long, long time. There are still going to be enclaves here that are just beautiful places that you want to visit. I mean, I went to Ecuador a couple of years ago. Beautiful things to visit. I would not want to live there. I think the United States is going to be kind of in that status. Civilization is going to move somewhere where people can be free. And the United States is going to join that world. They're going to have to eliminate this draconian tyranny that they're implementing on all of our population. And hopefully the 12,000 who have already renounced their citizenship and gone elsewhere will be joined by hundreds of thousands more who will be preparing themselves to come back and reclaim their country once it's collapsed. Because I think that's the patriotic thing to do. Well, hopefully next week will be more uplifting. This was kind of down because I'm kind of pissed off about those 78% higher waged government workers that produce nothing that I want and only infuriate and make my life miserable. So, good night for another week. We will see you next Thursday here on Double Cross Radio, UCY. And thank you, Jules, for another great week. I'm going to be finished with this book this week, and I'm writing a long, detailed email to Jeffrey Tucker and saying he has to come on the show and discuss this book because it is the most amazing thing I've ever read in my life. And I want you guys to hear it, to hear some of his words and not my, real lame attempts to describe what seems to come naturally him to talk about, because it's very uplifting and it's very positive, and it really gave me great hope for the future. So that's it for tonight. The music is starting.